Hello, everyone. Welcome to
Yes, it is a little twitchy.
it's to the writing clinic. I'm Khaki. I'm your faithful fireside companion. Some of you may know me from the Voice of Dog, the podcast that I've been doing since the pandemic hit. Prior to that, I've been an editor and a publisher. I started what was then called Bad Dog Books. It is quite something different now, since it was taken over by, or since it was kindly continued, I should say, by the Fur Planet Boys. Same with Fang and Roar, and this is actually I've actually done this before. My previous. My immediately previous streaming experience was one of these writing clinics with a bunch of writers, which was in 2011 when there was already streaming. It was called Ustream and Livestream were the big players at the time. Some of you may remember that, and some of you, I don't know, does that even work? May not have been born yet. If so, you're up very late, and you should talk to whoever your parents or caretakers are about maybe taking better care of you. I'm joined by some fellow writers. And a few of these are alumni of The Voice of Dog, the podcast where I read stories. Call ourselves the Friends of the Fireplace, a nickname that I have kind of fallen out of the habit of using on the show and really need to get back to. So I'm going to introduce some of my co-hosts here, starting with my co-host, Crimson Ruari.
Hello, I'm Crimson. I've written some things. A couple of them have been published. I've had a few stories with go out in Voice of Dog, and I'll also be keeping an eye on the chat and the general behavior of Twitch. Which, by the way, we are really struggling on the Twitch side here. So hopefully this will be recorded. This part of it will be in the recording because it's not currently going live very effectively.
Ah, is that the case? Can we maybe get some confirmation from people in the chat, whether we're showing up correctly? Um,
I'm watching the stream as well,
yeah.
and everyone's been basically there's been a lot of discussion that is kind of not really working.
Oh
So
dear. Well, okay. Maybe we need to figure out some solutions to that. We also have some moderators from Oxford, on the line. I'm going to continue with the introductions as if this is all going fine. Um, but please let me know if there's anything or if we need to start over. Yeah, we appear to have been kissed by a witch and cursed with technical difficulties. Deep cut for comedy podcast listeners. See if you can recognize that reference. Also joined by BP Rugger, who is vying for the costume competition.
I think pretty successfully. Although I think Rob Macwolf might have me beat there.
Very good. Yeah, Rob McWolf coming up in the other corner.
Hello. And yes, I am winning the costume contest because, as we all know, Apex Predator beats Herbivore every time.
Okay, so it's going to be one of those panels. Well, I'm going to have my work cut out for me as a moderator. Fortunately, I have some more help. Kurjibi, lovely to have you
Hello.
on board.
Yes, I'm Kojib. I've been writing for about 10 years now. Have not had anything published in the fur fandom, but I've had a few stories on Voice of Dog.
Awesome.
That
And
counts.
pardon me.
I just said that counts. That counts as publishing.
It certainly does. Yeah, and you can already see we have a sneak peek of a few of the authors. Now I'm going to invite them to come in as we discuss their stories, and that's kind of going to be the format for these writing clinics. A number of authors have submitted stories. We're going to read an excerpt of that. I'm going to read an excerpt of that. And then we're going to have a roundtable discussion with the author, and then we'll invite the author to stick around for one more story and help discuss the next. So we're going to have a fun rotating cast of characters to discuss these stories. But the important thing that I want to emphasize before we get started is that the intention of a clinic like this is to identify the areas where you can most readily improve as an author. Now that can be kind of confrontational or even a disappointing experience, because you're hearing about weaknesses, but it's never about a critique is not intrinsically critical. This comes from we come from a position of love. We come from a desire to improve, and like I really want to emphasize this for both the authors and the fellow reviewers. Yes, the important thing is to find out what could be better about this story and the writing in particular, which is a bit of a challenge because the excerpts are short. Right, there's a 1,000 words excerpt that doesn't really give you a feel for how someone constructs a narrative, but it does give you a feel for their writing voice and where that can be improved. So searching for those areas of improvement, certainly praising the things we appreciate, and together to come to advice to help people improve. Crimson, how are we doing on the Twitch chat?
Oh, it's still dead.
It's still dead. Oh, good
It's
gravy.
we're getting intermittent updates of imagery. So there's been some suggestion that perhaps we might try disabling our video in the hopes that that Discord can catch up.
That's a good idea. Is I'm checking the panelists playground here as well. Um, yeah, let's all reduce down to let's all turn off our video. Thank you.
I will cut mine.
Yep, I'll leave mine on because I'm streaming here,
It should be able
and
to
let's see
handle
if
at least one.
that improves.
Let's give it a second.
Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't really a way to do a tech test because we
not a
didn't have
Discord.
a 200 virtual con attendees to test it on.
Yeah.
Alas.
Alas. Well, I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to do things like this. And it's still pretty behind, so.
Okay. In that case, maybe I know that Karisis and Seferias are already on the chat. Would you mind vacating this room for now until you're invited back? So we don't have so many people on the call. Maybe that's affecting it as well.
Sure.
Thank you. And when your time comes, please pay attention to the little chat that we've made, and Crimson will invite you back. There will also probably be an announcement in the appropriate channel in the Discord. Thank you.
Yes, they can hear us now.
Awesome, doing better. Same goes for you, Mikasi, as well. Your story will come up, and then we'll invite you back. Going to keep it nice and contained for now. Okay, well, so you can hear me now, which I guess is a reference from a commercial that I have never seen because I don't watch live television, and certainly not American live television where I do not live. I'm going to try and share my screen here with you. And just 1 second while I pick the right window and not any of the other embarrassing windows that I have. Very good. Yes. You should be seeing on my screen Buddy Goodboy, Agent Peter Dumac in X Marks the Spot.
We may need to proceed as though they cannot see it.
Okay, that's no problem. I mean, I will be reading it, and okay, there was a little notification that my stream had reduced audio or video quality, but that's gone away. So I'm going to assume that it's fine. Don't worry, you can read along if inshallah technology allows it, and otherwise please enjoy my pleasing baritone. From Buddy Goodboy, we have the story Agent Peter Dumac in X Marks the Spot. This was originally submitted to me for consideration on The Voice of Dog. It was a little on the short side, but perfect for this. So let's see what we've got. I'm going to lubricate my instrument. Peter Dumac felt his tail bristle almost before he heard the storefront window shatter. He whirled around and caught a glimpse of black leather and a motorcycle helmet before getting shoulder checked in the stomach. He hit the ground hard. The figure on him purred with satisfaction. A gloved paw riffled through Peter's suit jacket. It took Peter's gun from his shoulder holster, then found the hidden pocket sewn into his jacket and removed a little nondescript box. The figure watched Peter's chest rise and fall, then stuffed the small box into its jacket pocket and ambled back the way it came. Moments later, Peter awoke to the sound of sirens. Mustn't get held up. Peter patted himself down. His suit was in bad shape. Glass sticking out everywhere. His beretta was gone. Wallet and keys were there, but the cheetah stopped cold. His shaking fingers groped for the pocket hidden in the lining of his coat. Empty. Damn, damn, damn. Can someone else on the chat, can everyone else on the chat please mute your microphones? I hear what looks like, I don't know, straws or drinking or something. Thank you. He clambered over the shattered storefront, crunching glass as he landed on the sidewalk. A tire track on the road showed a motorcyclist had sped off. He jogged over to his car and sprung the door. He tapped his smartwatch and hit the first speed dial. Red, I was just knocked out by an unknown assailant. They made off with my gun and the box. See again, Spots? Someone got the drop on you? I wasn't expecting a tail. I tagged the box. Can you track it? Of course. Pulling up the program now. Get moving. Police band shows multiple cruisers coming your way. Any idea who you're after? Peter slammed the car into gear and let the engine roar ahead. None. Which way? Left of the light. Peter growled softly to himself. He'd be lying if he didn't admit his tail was bouncing as he whipped around the turn, and his heart was racing as he closed in on his quarry. The chase satisfied his ancestors, and a toothy grin slid onto his face as a sign of respect and solidarity. But if he didn't get that box back, well, what's the rest of this for? He frowned and stepped on the accelerator. You drive like a maniac, Spots. Left to right, right, then straight 2 blocks. I might remind you how long it took to build that car. The car thundered between a bus and a family minivan, causing gasps and screams in both, and a compressed epithet from Peter's smartwatch. I'm glad I'm not out there with you. I intend to retire in one piece, fat and happy. Peter saw a powerful motorcycle in chrome and carbon fiber with a familiar rider weaving between crowded lanes. Found them. Confirmed, Peter. That's the target ahead. Be careful. Peter slammed into the next lane and thundered forward. The motorcyclist saw him and swung around, daring him onward. A semi-truck started across the intersection between them. Red, the seats in this car fold all the way back? Now's hardly the... Oh, Spot, you'll never make it. Peter gunned the engine and leaned his seat back as far as it would go. The car charged. It rammed under the semi. The roof crumpled in a thunderous crash of metal, but the car plowed on. It fish-tailed as the roof tore off. Peter pulled himself up. The target was right there. The target was stopped. He slammed the brakes and skidded just short of the motorcyclist. He smashed into the steering wheel. He wasn't missing teeth, but he was bleeding from his snout. Both his eyes would be blackened. The watch face was cracked. Leather creaked as the motorcyclist dropped into the seat next to him. Peter couldn't recognize their scent through the heavy smell of blood. There was a metal glint, and his own walnut and nickel beretta was pointed at his heart. Peter spit a mouthful of blood over what was left of the doorframe. I want that box. What happens if you don't get it? Peter looked into the blank faceplate before him. The world ends. Oh, I don't think so. I think you want to let me keep it. The world could be ours. The cyclist pulled the gun off Peter to lift off the helmet. Of course. Crystal. The rabbit shook her head and pulled her ears out of her helmet. Her diamond-white fur shimmered in the moonlight. Her smile was deadly. A cold blue stone glistened where her right eye should be. Don't think I've forgotten our time together, Mr. Dumac. I haven't either. I still have scars. She pulled his face closer. You and I were close. You loved me. He could almost taste her over the blood in his mouth. I thought I did. I was wrong. She stopped short of kissing him. You mean it? Yes. She growled and slowly scratched his face, splitting the skin and digging a deep furrow into his cheek. He cried out. There is nothing better than this. You're a predator. You want me. To chase me around the world for as long as we last. The world's so much bigger than I knew. I never realized how small you are. How small we both were. Peter's paw sneaked back out of Crystal's pocket. He had it. and that makes it much easier to say goodbye. He tapped a button on the dash. The passenger seat ejected, rocketing Crystal into the air. Peter shifted the car into gear and trundled off. Inside the restaurant, Anthony could see maitre d's fussing at the front door. A tow truck seemed to be hauling away half a sports car. Anthony was an accountant. He never went to restaurants like this. It seemed unusual. At the front, a cheetah in a ripped white dinner jacket, drenched in blood, staggered in and shouldered past a throng of busboys. Anthony gasped. Peter? Peter stood silently before Anthony. He put a box in Anthony's paw and dropped to one knee. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna stop the screen sharing here and invite my co-hosts to come back online, and the author as well. Am I still here?
Yes.
It said that. Okay, good. I just got a notification that it stopped streaming. I was very frightened there for a second.
It's your screen
Whew.
stream.
Screen stream. Yes, yeah. The tangerine screen dream. And the author, Buddy Goodboy. Okay. I had a really good time with this story. Now, I'd read through this initially when it was submitted for the Voice of Dog, but I always skim them because I get a lot of submissions, or I do a lot of episodes per week, so I don't like read them very very tightly before deciding whether they're appropriate for the show. And I often look for like red flags, like is it even finished? Is it perhaps super duper racist? That has never happened, but something to definitely look out for. Certainly after, yeah, there have been some issues with certain publications who found themselves in unfortunate positions after they weren't quite as critical. So like that's the sort of stuff I look for. I had not seen the bit about the ejector seat. I wasn't ready for that. I sort of saw it coming, and oh, that was such a treat. So let's yeah. I recall that BP Bullpup, you said that you had some notes on this story going in because you kindly offered to review this first story with us.
I did.
And perhaps we could start there.
I really like this story. I felt that the beginning was super strong, and I thought the ending was really strong. I really like how it ended on. He put a box in Anthony's paw and dropped to one knee. I thought both of those really conveyed a lot of emotion without drawing things out. It was very quick and very powerful because of that. And looking through it, I think there's a couple things that I could really increase that I wanted to help to bring out what I really liked about the story. And so I think the big thing that I think slows down the story and doesn't add anything is the second paragraph. The story starts off with Peter Dumac, and then it goes to the figure. So it goes from basically from third person in Peter Dumac to third person with the figure on top of him, who we later find out is X. But then almost all the information that is in that second paragraph is also in the third paragraph. That it took the Beretta and the box, and I think that by getting rid of the second paragraph, it makes the box much more interesting. Because you go through that, yep, he lost his Beretta, whatever. I don't care about my Beretta, my box. I think that actually adds to the tension and interest of the story. If you give rid of that second paragraph, and all the information in it is still there. The other problem I have with the second paragraph is that going third person omniscient, because Peter Dumac is knocked unconscious, to write into the internal monologue of mustn't get held up, I find personally jarring. That may be a me thing. I know other people who use third person omniscient going between person and then into that internal monologue. I always find it comes out of nowhere, because if I'm thinking in third person omniscient, then it's really that sort of bird's eye view of going around everyone else, and then just suddenly going into someone's mind. Just fine, as I said, just a bit jarring to me. But I think by getting rid of that second paragraph, it becomes third person limited, which I think adds to the tension of it, because then we're very much focusing this one person's point of view, and he doesn't know what's going on because he's been unconscious. Also, the other thing I find that I found that bugged me a little bit about the second paragraph is I didn't realize from he hit the ground hard that he was knocked unconscious. And so I read the second paragraph. I'm like, what's Peter doing through this? And then get to the third paragraph. I'm like, oh, Peter's unconscious. And
You're
so I
really
think
doing a character assassination on that second paragraph, man. The
yes,
paragraph can't hurt you, Beep.
it
Just
can.
shoot the paragraph and be done with it, like a good spy.
Yeah, this sounds like double indemnity. You can only condemn it for one crime at a time.
No, I can't. As you can see, I can do more than one crime.
Thank you. All right. Okay. So who else thinks that this this second paragraph should be tried and executed without without a jury?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I don't know if it needs to be executed, but I did have the exact same note that the perspective is suddenly different for this paragraph and this paragraph only, and that everything the paragraph is doing, the next 2 to 3 paragraphs are doing more strongly.
So the sins. No, that's a terrible thing to call them. But so this paragraph does indeed stand out because it changes perspective, and the narrative perspective, compared to the rest of the story, and it's a bit redundant. I do think it has one merit going for it, which is like it's the only part that sets up a mystery for us as the reader to enjoy. The figure purring with satisfaction. Now that's supposed to, like, I guess, put you on the wrong foot, because part of the reveal is that it's a rabbit woman, who's done this. Crimson, do you have any observations before I monologue?
No, I mean, I think and I'm not sure that that's strictly required. Or honestly, if you wanted to, you could throw that into one of the other places. Even potentially. No, this is kind of coming out of nowhere. So if that was a thing that was really important, maybe there's a way to
Yeah,
do it. But honestly, like, is it that important?
yeah.
Kind of you could probably just live without it. I usually, when I'm going back and editing my stuff, if I get into a place like that, I have lately just toss it.
Yeah.
So just, I'm not gonna go all Hemingway on it and be like, oh, you only need to use 3 words, or strunk and white, which would be the other, omit needless words. But
Yeah.
but I do have a tendency to overword my stuff. So, and I think if I was looking at this from my own writing perspective, I'd just cut it. As I said, most of the other information is there, with more tension, or would be there with more tension. So,
Buddy, how are you doing so far?
Doing pretty well, I think. That's actually pretty sound advice. For context, I wound up writing this story with a very quick turnaround time for the Furthermore 2019 con book. And
Yeah.
the situation was I found out about 2 or 3 days beforehand that what the deadline was for this. And I also work as a full-time attorney, so my free time that week was relatively limited. So I wound up writing this thing in about 6 hours, soup to nuts. So there was not a whole lot of editing done in this piece. So now that I'm taking a look at it with a little bit of distance since then, I definitely see what you guys are talking about. The shift in perspective is a little bit jarring, and you're right. Had I noticed at the time that the information would be duplicative, I probably would have cut it.
Thank you. We completely understand what it's like to write under a deadline, and I'd like to say more generally, to everyone on whose story is going to be addressed here. Like, no one should feel like they need to justify whether the story that they submitted is perhaps not representative of their greater work. Like, we all write to deadlines. We understand that kind of pressure, but we can just focus on the text, or in particular, one criminal paragraph that we think needs to be removed for the benefit of society. As seems to be the case here. Now, I noticed a few things myself as I was reading through. one that you had a fun little tongue twister in there. Peter patted his pocket that I tripped over.
Oh.
I now
Honestly, I did not notice that one.
no, right? You don't notice that until you have to read it aloud. That was fun.
Well, what would a
Um,
spy story be without a trap?
yeah, exactly. One thing I noticed was, let me see. Yeah, the car thundered, and then it thundered forward, and then there was a thunderous crash of metal
Ah,
within the same span of pages. Great, great imagery, but we, yeah,
A tiny bit
uh,
repetitive.
a
Someone
tiny,
get a
yeah.
muffler.
Did anyone else notice that
Well, now that you point
as
it
I
out.
was reading it? Yeah, right. But
No, there was. I think that came out in the section of the story where I was trying to keep track of the stream.
oh, good gravy. How are we
But
doing there, by the way? Is everyone still on
we
board?
can see you just fine. Actually, you were in
Okay,
full
good,
motion video. We
awesome.
could probably pop when it's like one person giving their thoughts. They might be able to pop their video on. We could see how that goes.
And the screen that I'm sharing?
The screen that you're sharing, I believe the person who is hosting the Twitch integration would have to select your screen share in order for it to go out over the stream.
Oh, is that the
N-
case?
Nobody else has succeeded at doing a screen share, but given that I had to select your stream in order your screen share to in order to see it, that's
Okay.
probably what's required.
Okay, well, I'll leave my screen share up, and perhaps our friends from the Furry Writers Guild, who are kindly doing the technical moderation, can get that up. And if not, we'll still discuss it. So everything will be just fine. I noticed that Red was introduced, and that's the person on the smartwatch, which introduced us to the fact that this is a spy story, and that Peter has a handler, and like there was almost no description given. There was no he said she said on the section where Red and Peter are talking with each other. I know that I always find that as a narrator, as a reader, I'm particularly sensitive to that because I s- like it's a lot of work to figure out what the right accent is when you don't know who's speaking. And I know that this is used as a stylistic choice, and sometimes as a crutch. I find by less experienced writers who aren't very confident in their narrative voice, and so they populate a scene with just a bunch of different characters talking to each other, where partly like either they assume that the reader will understand who's speaking, yeah, because it's one instance of speech after another, or they think that they're titillating the reader by making them try to figure out who's speaking and who their personalities are. For me as a narrator, it's absolute hell because I have to read through the whole story and then for every sentence go back like and it's a lot of
Course.
editing. I couldn't do it live. Now that's not what I see going on here. It seems much more deliberate and sort of a cinematic choice. Was it that deliberate, buddy?
Yes, actually. I did wind up doing a lot of research on the particular. Basically, I wound up looking up a lot of Ian Fleming, and his sentences tend to be short, tend to be concrete. There's not a whole lot in the way of dialogue tags,
Yeah.
but you still. Well, I mean, a lot of his characters do sound a little samey, but you do get the impression of who's talking by what they're saying, what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think that that certainly applies here, especially since it's just two people. How do we the rest of the brain trust feel about dialogue tags?
I feel a little self-conscious hearing you say how much you need them because I know at least one of the things I've given you
Yeah.
deliberately avoided having them. I've found that uh, when I'm listening or reading, I get bored of he said, she said, he said, she said very quickly, and I've found that I can instead of having the dialogue tag, you can replace them with a piece of narrative. And
like an action that the
yeah,
person
yeah.
performs. Yeah.
Like the you won't get away with this. He reached into his pocket feeling for his gun. I won't let you. It still performs the same work as he said, even though nothing in the he said talked about him saying anything. I do think in this example, though, the context and the content of the pieces of dialogue is doing all the work needed for the dialogue tags. Like we saw him get knocked out. We saw someone take a gun from him. We saw him think to himself, "Oh, I need to chase someone to get this thing back."
Cinematically speaking, we are the camera that's following Peter. We're in the car with him. We're listening over his smartwatch. So yeah, Red is just the voice on the other side. All of the actions that are taking place here that you're talking about, Peter slammed the car into gear and let the engine roar ahead. Like all of those tags are on Peter's side, which is, I mean, in this case, fine. It's doing all the work. Red is just a voice who doesn't need context.
And it's entirely within genre expectations to have him go into an action scene talking to some operator, some oracle.
Yes, the guy in the chair.
Yeah, exactly. So when we just start getting tagless dialogue, the genre is there to like say, "Oh yeah, and here's the thing you were expecting." The only thing that bugged me a little about Red is that after the encounter with Crystal, Red never comes back in any way. I know that the smartwatch is smashed, but like I felt like I was expecting just a little, maybe just a couple lines of denouement on, okay, and maybe does Red try to call Anthony to find out if Peter a MacGuffin back and pull the proposal off, or something like that. Like just a little bit of like an off-screen one-liner from Q right before the credits roll, as it were.
Yeah. I don't know.
I
I don't
admit,
really.
that's one of my favorite genre cliches in the James Bond movies.
Yes.
Q's little one-liners before the credits roll, and that was definitely
the exasperation
what I was thinking of. Yes, so that's a good idea. I may take another crack at this one and add something like that in.
Yeah,
a final line is really the only place where it would work.
100%, yeah.
Like you could do a buzzing phone in the pocket or something, but like it's almost hard. It's very hard to add some of that, I think, in this medium, because you can't have like 2 or 3 things happening in the same thing that you're processing, right?
Yeah.
Like one line of text is one line of text. You can't have like this action and little tiny corner things happening. I will say for the tagless dialogue, I feel like in this particular case, it gives it a very nice. Well, maybe some of the later ones. Certainly, that initial example, it was nice because it was very much like a punchy action moment, and
it was very crisp.
It is, and also because you're talking to your handler, kind of thing. Like those, it was a very like it was a radio conversation that had to happen in very short, little, efficient bits, and I felt like that punched pretty well. And that's one of the places where sometimes if I'm doing that, I'll use it for like sharp bits of dialogue. But you go more than 3 or 4 lines, and you're like, I have no idea who's talking anymore.
One last thing that I'll address before we go on. We have a few more stories to discuss. I really enjoyed the confrontation with the X. There was a lot of excellent use of circumstance and imagery to really like thematically solidify the relationship that they had. Like that she took his own gun, his own walnut and nickel Beretta. Like this is where it's described. That's intimate, right? These are choices that he made for his tool of his trade, which she stole from him and pointed it at his heart specifically, not his head, at his heart. Um, the dialogue that or the monologue I should almost say that Crystal had explaining his desires to him was, I mean, that was probably villainesque. Calling him Mr. Dumac as well, like there, it was gorgeous, exactly what I wanted. And then he pushed the fucking passenger seat ejector switch, which is so good.
I thought that was it may be a little heavy-handed as a metaphor, but I think it's genre appropriate.
Well, that's kind of what I mean. That metaphor of like how great would it be to be able to yeet someone out of your life who's trying to drag you back to a previous stage in your development that you find that you're done with.
Thank you. One thing that I try to concentrate on when I'm working in genre is to externalize an internal conflict as much as possible. Um, I mean, really, this could have all been done with him just like sitting there in a room thinking about it. But
Yeah.
I think the fact that it turned into a car chase is definitely a lot more fun to look at.
Well, thank you very much for submitting the story. We're going to move on to the next story by Summercat. Please do stick around and help us to discuss that one. Bullpup, thank you so much for chiming in. Yeah, if we keep the pace up, we might actually get around to yours. Bullpup has submitted a story for the sort of backup list in case we go short and we need a few more. That was very kind and considerate of him. In the meantime, I wonder if we can get Summercat on the chat. Whether Crimson, you can reach out to Summercat and invite them
Yes.
to join us. And meanwhile, I'll start reading the story.
Um,
Um,
just to chime in as the voice of the chat,
yes.
Dr. Isaac says, yeah, my most recent big work in progress features a 5-man band dynamic, so signaling who's speaking is really common, and either via tag or action. And then if there's only 2 of them, dropping tags happens more often. So yeah, completely, there's a lot of consensus there.
Right. Awesome. Yes. Thank you for involving the chat as well, because the one thing that this clinic actually needs is a lot more participants discussing the same topic. I say that as a joke. I really do mean it. Thank you. But yes, if you could invite Summercat aboard, then
Has
I will
been
start
done.
reading their story. Excellent. So Summercat has submitted a story called "A Cooling Rack." RACC. This is a fun little pun that I'm already enjoying. He closed the door to the chamber, then looked up to the vaulted windows in the tall room. Once upon a time, this was used for something else, but now, once a month, it was his cell. The beast within him stirred as the moon shone down into the center of the room, but it was still only waking up, so the man was able to suppress the animal. Not for long, but the man didn't need long. Walking to the wall, over to the wall, with practice he, pardon me, walking over to the wall, with practice he quickly chained himself up. The chains were strong, stronger than the beast that roiled within him, and locked in such a way that it could not undo them, clever hands or not. Then the deed was done. He sat against the stone, shivering as it chilled his skin. He hated being nude, as if some mark of the beast would show up on his skin, but time and again he has found himself left with nothing but scraps of fabric whenever he wore clothing or even a blanket. Besides, he felt a dark chuckle burble within him as the hated familiar sensation began to build up. He wouldn't be cold for long. In fact, he was no longer cold at all, and his body began to shake as the beast within him fully awoke. The man began to thrash around in his change as the sensation of his impending transformation started to overwhelm his senses. Snarling and throwing spittle about, body twisting and contorting as the heat radiated from him, feeling the sensation of ants crawling over his skin as his body hair began to thicken and grow. Distracted by the fight between his weakening mind and the feral soul of the beast, he did not notice the door to his prison was opened, and a woman approached him. But the sudden cool touch on his burning hot skin made him gasp. The cold feeling lingered where the hand touched, even as it roamed over his growing body, playing with the growing hair and fur of his shifting form. His jaw dropped, hanging open as he began to pant, groans of hot anguish turning into pleasant, cool huffs. His thoughts were confused. Did he not send everyone away tonight? Who was this woman? Pain lanced through him, questions ripped away as his feet burned, beginning to contort and reshape. But the woman's hands were already there, gently massaging the flesh as the man's toes spread and arch lengthens. Cool rubs defeated hot pain in the man's calves and thighs as his lower limbs finished taking on the bestial raccoon shape. Coolness instead of heat filled his body, the rage and anger of the beast replaced with a placid, pleasant calm. His ears were tugged and reshaped underneath expertly rubbing hands as the fur engulfed the man's face. His tail grew out to full length, the normal thrashing of his transformation replaced with a slow, gentle wave. The man felt her handles gently caress his chin as the pressure within began to build, teeth already reforming and sharpening. He opened his eyes, already shifted to the bestial color and shape, but still holding a spark of intelligence, and looked deeper into her own, just as her human nose touched his blackening one. He opened his mouth to say something, to warn her away, but she moved in first and wrapped an arm around his broader shoulders, pulling him into a keep kiss, her tongue exploring his mouth. The man closed his eyes as he fell into the deep kiss, feeling oddly at peace as the pressure in his face burst free, mouth and nose stretching and bulging to form a raccoon muzzle. The shift was oddly without pain, but instead the man felt an eager feeling growing as he began to return to kiss more passionately, his longer tongue exploring her human mouth. He felt his whiskers arch as she pulled away, a soft whimper emitting from the bestial were raccoon as he wished to continue the embrace, quickly turning to squeaks of fear as the woman began to unlock his change. He was a beast, an animal. He'll hurt her if she lets him. The chains dropped to the floor and he was released. The man expected to leap at her with murderous rage and tensed to fight off his bestial soul, but a heartbeat passed, then another, as the transformed man slowly realized that he was in control. The man tried to speak, but all he could do was squeak in confusion as the woman pulled him away from the wall, towards the center of the room. She guided his paws to her clothing, and eventually the raccoon man got the idea to help her undress. She stood there fully nude, then looked up into the man's eyes and smiled, wrapping her arms around his larger weir form and pulling it close against her. A warmth filled the man's body, but it was not the heat of rage. A tension inside the man unwound, relaxing as he embraced the woman back, holding each other close as they stood together in the moonlight. He would have questions later, but for now, he would have peace. Thank you. I believe we have the author on the chat now. Summercat, is that correct?
Yep, that is correct.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Pardon me.
And by the way, your audio narration made the story sound so much more awesome.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was a good story to begin with. I did trip on it a few times. I mean, there were a few typos that like I guess even more experienced narrators would be able to read over those typos. But I find it very important to stick to the text that is supplied to me. And yeah, it's clear that the woman had hands and not handles. So I apologize for saying that. There were a few other instances of typos. Um, can I invite Buddy to give us comments and any thoughts that he might have had on this story as the author whose work was so previously savaged? Did you find a death marked paragraph that just has to go?
No, actually, I think
Okay.
that each of the paragraphs adds something, so they justify their continued existence. But that may be the defense attorney in me talking. So,
Good job, paragraphs. You get to breathe another day.
now I do like the. I'm not sure if metaphor or motif or what the more appropriate term for the literary device would be, but um, using the differences in temperature to obviously those are connected to the were raccoon's mood and how he relates to other people around him. I did like that. I thought that was a good nice touch because you definitely set up that um, that heat of rage and confusion during the
Yeah,
transformation. So I think that
and arousal toward the end a little bit.
yeah,
But strangely, strangely, the arousal is associated with coolness. With
right, which is not something you typically see. I thought
yeah,
that was an interesting touch.
I think that's a really interesting. Pardon me. Go ahead.
Well, this actually originated as just a couple of paragraphs in a chat room where I was explaining the concept of someone going in and trying to appease and ease the person going through the transformation. Usually in werewolf stories, we see them going through this painful, arduous transformation by themselves.
Yeah, it's always a solitary experience.
So my thought is, what if someone was there to help relieve the tension, help relieve the pain, to help keep them stable during all this? Would they still be in control or be controlled by the beast as opposed to being in control of themselves?
It's interesting that you describe this as such a. I mean, I don't mean to belittle it at all, but such a literal reading of the text. Like I was into this as an allegory for body dysmorphia. You know, like the pain of transformation, of being in a body that you don't want. That's like he continually refers to himself as the man, um, and then he's a beast, and that is not what a man wants to be in the context of this story. These changes are painful, winding up in a body that you do not want, and to have someone present, touching that body, appreciating it, soothing it, guiding this, like affirming the qualities that this body is exhibiting seemed like it was soothing, almost therapeutic to the man who's struggling with this dysmorphia. Was I looking at the rest of my cohorts? Was I alone in this observation?
Oh, not at all, not at all. I think that's my favorite part of this story is the way the sexuality is present, but it's being given special emotional weight beyond just sexuality. It's used to calm him, let him gain control of a part of himself he hates. And I love that I can read a metaphor for example, stigmatized sexuality and transformative self-acceptance that,
Right.
or as Khaki said, is body dysmorphia. That's I think that's a really powerful metaphor, and it's nice to see the fiction using that and saying, yes, there's sexuality going on here, but it's being put to a purpose more than just that. I really like that.
Yeah.
I agree. I wish that I'd thought of the body dysmorphia issue, but honestly, to me, I was definitely thinking of this as a metaphor for the trauma of birth,
Yeah.
Or self-actualization, if you prefer.
Right. Yeah.
Sexuality as an act of mercy to help somebody cope with what they're becoming, what they are. I really like that.
Wow.
Rob, I see.
Can
Yeah.
we call the police because we just had a murder here, death of an author in live. I will be honest. I was not thinking about any of that when writing this, although I can very easily see it. I do a lot of transformation stuff where the people often either don't like or really do like what's happening to them, but usually have some sort of acceptance at the end. So I actually can see those themes you were talking about in other works I've written too now. So I wouldn't say it's death of the author so much as, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that too.
See, so I had a I.
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I will say I didn't pick up on either of those. I had my own little bit of a second paragraph type of an issue here. To be very frank, I got very held up and just kind of confused by how did he lock himself up?
He has
Because it very specifically says he locked himself up. I was like,
no, he sent everyone away.
It kept coming back to me. It's like I'm reading through the transformation. It's like, but how did he lock himself up? How'd that happen?
Yes, we see him walking over to the wall. With practice, he quickly chained himself up. It's just.
I mean, I guess
I just assumed it was like handcuffs where you close them and they lock, and then you need a key to open them again, something like that.
Yeah, I will.
Well, I guess it's
flat out.
how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Like, you don't take a left there. You just right with practice. He tells us. Sorry, go ahead.
I will fully admit that part of the story was written pretty much last. Normally, when I write stuff, I jump straight to the action. I don't do a lot of the build up because that's where I'm focused on. So the whole locking up part actually was written nearly last, and it was mainly just there to make it feel like more of a complete story than much thought
Yeah,
was put
to
there.
close a logical gap.
So, just a thought on that. You mentioned elsewhere in this story that he had sent everyone away, like for their own safety, which is why it's distressing that this woman shows up. That is actually another easy solution, which is that he had the servants chain himself up or chain him up, and then uh, sent them away. Like
Servants. That's interesting. I hadn't caught on that.
he's,
Did this feel sort of aristocratic?
it did to me. He's got a chamber where he can chain himself up when he turns into a were raccoon.
He has a
I
chamber
mean,
that you
that's
can refer to as a chamber.
yeah,
Yes,
that's
yeah,
pretty
no,
bourgeois, man.
no,
I
you're
put
right.
his
You're
head on
right.
him.
Tall room, vaulted windows.
I feel called out.
I
Yep.
mean, I get a very like Regency vibe off of that side of
No,
it,
you're
which
right.
there's
Yeah,
a lot of werewolf stuff that's set there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the sort of mental image I did have when I was
Yeah,
trying
you're
to
right.
describe the scene. So that does work out. So that was the mental image I was trying to project. So
All right, to get to the clinic part, I'm gonna move the tempo up a bit. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we'll because we have a few more stories to discuss, and we're crossing on almost an hour by now. So some of the big things that jumped out on me in terms of the your voice and your narrative, like typos are I mean, they're always a problem. Like, this can use a quick edit pass. There was a redundant sentence here. He walked over to go. Yeah, walking to the wall, over to the wall, that was duplication. Like, these are just accidents. But I did notice a few instances where the tense changed from past to present, and in some cases it felt appropriate, and in some cases it didn't. I'm struggling um, to find that. Oh, and the passive voice. His body began to shake as the beast within him fully awoke. Like, there are very few cases where it's necessary or appropriate to begin an action. It tends to be, and not to cast aspersions to our Mustard brothers, weasel words.
I resemble that remark.
Yeah, especially because he began to thrash around afterwards. Nah, his body shook, and the man thrashed around like that. That it begins doesn't need to be introduced generally. I'm trying to find an example of the tense change. Did anybody else notice that while I was reading it?
There may be one or two I missed when I was originally writing this. It was present. I think it was present tense, but
Yeah.
I generally prefer when I'm actually done writing it and I go back and fix things up, change it to past. So there may have been a few places I missed.
Oh, I see one that I actually got wrong. Cool rubs defeated hot pain in the man's calves and thighs. Rubs is a noun. I didn't realize that as I was reading the story, so probably not so prevalent as I thought. Yeah, thank you very much, Summercat, for.
There is one thing that I don't want to move on till we've talked about. It's
By all
a
means.
thing I see a lot in people who most of their writing practice is online, and it's just kind of like inging a lot. If we go up to like
gerunds.
Yeah. Like, for example, like the man began to thrash around in his chains. That paragraph, snarling and throwing spittle, body twisting and contorting, feeling the sensation of ants crawling over his skin. Then the next paragraph as well, playing with the growing hair and fur, jaw dropped, hanging open, groans of hot anguish turning to pleasant, cool huffs. I think it's a style that like grows out of writing in chats and instant messenger programs a lot, and I think
Interesting.
a lot. I see it so much, and I think most people do not realize they are doing it.
I feel called out right now too.
Same.
I have written that in chats and
Yeah.
other things.
It makes it really perilously easy to accidentally wind up with a big old pile of dangling participles.
Yeah. Yeah, the eternal temptation of the run-on sentence.
Oh gods, I'm guilty of those.
Well, aren't we all? That's a very good observation.
Yeah, I didn't catch it.
I didn't even realize I was doing that.
I guess a lot of us aren't particularly sensitive to that. That might
Ing.
be worthy of an inging. Yeah.
That
Ing
is
bats.
that sort of like blind spot thing is why I like to set stories down for a while and come back to them with fresh eyes.
Good point.
Yeah, but like I've noticed it happening for quite a while, and I have never yet pointed it out to someone and had them reply, "Oh yeah, I meant to do that."
Yeah.
I mean, I mean to do it. I just didn't realize, there could be issues with it. So I'm going to keep an eye out on that.
So,
Yeah.
one thing I'd like to chime in from the chat before we move on. Since we're
Yes.
about 20 minutes of the
Our
story was
29th panelists.
yeah, was Resolute asks the bigger question is of course how would he unchain himself if he had chained himself up? So the other side of the mechanical question.
Well, if he had servants, then someone would come
Exactly.
in the next
This is-
day, I guess. But
this is
yeah, that is it.
if you're gonna be a werewolf that gets chained up, you'd better have servants.
Well, all I can say is one of my favorite Telegram stickers. Well, if furry porn physics are in play.
Fair enough.
Anyway, I'll mute myself now.
Yeah, thank you. Do stick around, and we'll discuss the next story by Mikasi Wolf. Buddy, thank you so much for joining us. It was wonderful to have you on the panel.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for the story. Crimson, if you could invite Mikasi Wolf, and his story Relinquished is coming up now. The first sure thing you notice when you leave is the complete loss of some senses. The smells you're used to associating with your waking life, the scent of your mate beside you, the pungence of the street outside, the coming of rain as per the weather forecast, even the faint smell of yesterday's leftovers in the living room and kitchen, an assertion of the food we love so much, of the drink we cherish. Canids, like I, have it the worst. Our sense of smell is paramount to our getting about day to day, how we know when to turn to greet or nuzzle a family member or co-worker, even if they were creeping up on you. It's how we know that our car needs maintenance just by the scent of the exhaust alone, though I could only afford one in the last 2 years before I left. Your sense of touch also goes as well. Textures will all feel the same to you, rough or smooth, hot or cold, so you would never hear a ghost of who wouldn't be found outside in cold weather. So you would never hear of a ghost who wouldn't be found outside in cold weather. It just doesn't work that way. The only problem is that we can still feel emotions. Hurt, sadness, despair. That takes you as much as if you were alive, as if death weren't already bad enough. When I left, the first thing I noticed was my wife, Siu Mei, screaming at my bed, her ears down and flat across her head. I went over to ask the wolf dog, what's wrong? She wouldn't respond, even when I shook her shoulder. Wondering what could have caused her in such a state, I then realized who it was on the bed. It was a wolf, his features matching that of mine. The exact same face that I saw in the mirror each day before I brushed my fangs, dressed for work, even when I checked out the white strands of fur gathering my ruff and muzzle and brow and ears. The strange thing was that I couldn't smell myself or even my wife. Not believing in what I saw with my own two eyes, most especially my nose, I moved to the bedside mirror. I would have been relieved to see myself reflected back in the mirror, were it not for the fact that there were two other guys behind me, namely a white and black wolf. I swore and turned toward the interlopers. There was never a stranger pair I've seen, along with even stranger choice of dressing. The white wolf wore a white trench coat with a white side cap between his ears. He held a grey envelope in a paw. Likewise, the black wolf was dressed in a black trench coat with a black side cap, though he twirled a nightstick in paw, a pair of black handcuffs on his waist belt. "Who the hell are you guys?" I demanded, stepping between them and Siu Mei, fangs bared. I took several quick sniffs at them, but no scent of any sort can be gleaned from them. "Who the hell are we?" "Well, you answered your own question," the black wolf snorted with a scowl. "Sorry to intrude, Yufeng," began the white wolf. He drew a document from his envelope, some kind of thick yellow parchment. "By order of the 18 courts, I have the duty of informing you your 100 days begins today." I looked blankly back. "Your last 100 days on the earthly realm." Say what? I didn't know what these gangsters were getting at. An extortion racket I didn't know of? All my life I wasn't involved with the gangs, not ever since Grandpa warned me about the consequences of associated with that sort when I was a cub. I heard of the 369 and the Market 1 gangs, but 18 courts was completely named to me. "Come on, no ghost can be that thick," snarled the black wolf. "Don't you get it? You're dead." Dead. Cannot smell or be heard. I looked back at my lying form. Around me, 2 paramedics were trying to load me onto a stretcher, and though they were yelling instructions to one another, I couldn't seem to hear through the pounding in my head. Then I realized who the black and white wolf was. In Chinese mythology, the souls of the dead are guided to hell by black and white ghost guard, also known as the ghosts of impermanence, or much more formally, General Fan and Xie. Xie was supposed to be the more approachable of the two, and no one could agree what species Fan and Xie were originally before taking up their mantles. In the deceased's eyes, they always appeared in the same species as them, to ease their way forward through species familiarity. Though they were always portrayed wearing ancient Chinese robes, with General Xie and Fang being bearing a fan and chain respectively, it looked like they amended their dress and equipment to keep up with modern sensibilities. 18 courts would refer to the 18 courts of hell of the underworld. "Have some tact, bro," chided the white wolf as my head reeled with these revelations. "But perhaps we're getting ahead of ourselves. Mortal Yufeng, I am General Xie, and this is General Fan. We are sorry for your loss." Xie glared at Fan before he could say otherwise. "Oh, I can't. My wife and kids need me." I dropped to my knees with my paws clasped. "Come on, give me another year with them. Maybe a month." "Sorry, but it ain't up to us." Pardon me. "Sorry, but it ain't up to us. The orders came from down below." If I thought I could appeal to Xie's good nature, I was wrong. Even if we could, the punishment from the Yama kings would be far too great. "Yeah, cowheads still haven't gotten over the fracas he and Horseface got into," sneered Fan. He was referring to another pair of hell guards who had once been punished for letting another mortal go free. "Look, mortal, 100 days is plenty of time. Go visit your old haunts and attend the memorial gatherings people set up in your honor. Perhaps you will then appreciate how much life on Earth really means to you." All right. Thank you. I believe we have Mikasi Wolf online at the moment. Do we not?
We do.
Yes, we do. Just mute at the moment. Not muted. I see. Thank you for that story. Who would like to chime in first?
Well, if no one else is going, I'd say I really I like the story. I have a huge weakness for uh mythology and very very tightly focused scenes like this one. Like in real time, this entire story is happening in less time than it takes to read it.
Yes. Yes.
So I love that the entire story is just this character has just died, and a pair of psychopomps show up to explain it, and that's all there is. It's just this. It's almost just a tableau rather than a scene.
Yeah, because he's
I
not interacting with anyone.
yeah, I love how focused and granular the story gets, and just examining the details of this scene.
Thank you.
Yeah, the strength of this is definitely the ability to take mythology, apply it to a character we recognize in a modern setting, and just let the natural emotions that arise from that play, examine each one briefly, and then get through each one till we're done. So I really like that.
I think the flip side to that. I mean, yes, I appreciated that as
Can
well.
we
I think
pause a moment and
Oh,
see
yeah,
if
sure.
Akazi can be heard this time?
Yeah, good point, Mikasi.
Struggling with the microphone.
Yeah, we still don't hear you yet, I'm afraid. So
Okay.
perhaps one of the moderators would be able to help Mikasi via chat. I'm sure that they've encountered these technical difficulties before. Because yeah, we certainly do want to hear from you. Oh,
Yes.
that sounds promising.
There we are.
Can you speak again, please? We heard some noise, but not the. Oh wow, that sounded so ghostly. Has something happened? Are you seeing a black wolf and a white wolf? Back away. Come to the light. Come here.
No, don't go to the light. Go the other direction.
Oh no, flip. How does it work? Okay. So the flip side that I was talking to, I'm going to continue while Mikasi and please do jump in whenever you get your microphone sorted out. The flip side to that is that I found the story like a little bit expository as well, particularly when Fang and Xie showed up. And apologies for my pronunciation. I don't speak Chinese myself, Mandarin, I should say. So after such a point was made that his emotions are still in place after leaving with the capital L, which I struggled to render, that his emotion stayed. He adapted to the idea of being guided to the netherworld by psychopomps, as Rob correctly described them, very very like easily and quickly, and adjusted to death far more easily than I imagine I would if I encountered my own lifeless husk. So I don't know if it was being played for comedy, a sort of a dry black comedy, Mikasi.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it's kind of a dark comedy. Wait, can anyone hear me for the moment?
Yes,
we can.
we can hear
Yes,
you.
we got you now.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hoorah! Thanks for having me on your panel. Yeah, it was actually because it's actually meant to be a dark story, but
Yeah.
but since about a few years back, I tend to put humor in my stories because that's how I naturally think, and I
Yeah.
felt that everything is humorous in the right situation. Even a bad situation can be humorous. I mean, example, a really extreme example is when you think of a person being hit with a hammer, you don't think of it as funny. But in Tom and Jerry, it is very funny. I don't know why. So in this case, there is humor if you look at it from an outsider point of view. But if you're the guy who just died and you see two hoodlums in front of him, obviously it doesn't seem very humorous.
Yeah, I liked how the two psychopaths, Fan and Cher, like this is their job. Actually, no. So on the one hand, I really liked how plain and to the point they were. On the other hand, how can they be surprised at someone being an inexpert at the afterlife, having just died? They must have encountered that before, or are they just they're just teasing with it?
They will actually, as in they experience this often enough, such that I mean, if you do a relatively monotonous, do the same thing everyday job, you probably want to make each encounter different in some way. I mean, just like you greet the person at the door, you might not greet him the same way every time he passes through.
Yeah, good point. Summercat, since you were the previous author, maybe do you have any thoughts to share on this story? And if you are still muted.
Yep.
There
No,
you go.
I just forgot which button undoes it. In terms of construction, it felt a lot of info dump or exposition.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of background information there that did help work, but this really does, rather than feel like a short, complete story, this feels like the start of a novella or a short novel, rather than a complete short story.
Yeah, I think this is all centered around one big old paragraph here, starting with "dead, cannot smell or be heard," and then going through the ghosts of impermanence, the black and white ghost guard, and like that is very expository. Now that I'm looking at it, I think that's where most of the sort of exposition is really contained. So maybe this is um, the the paragraph to be assassinated this time around.
I wouldn't necessarily say assassinated so much as perhaps the entire thing can be rewritten to be merged with that third paragraph, where instead of talking about where the first thing you notice when you leave is complete loss of senses, is to talk about how he woke up not being able to smell.
Yes, because that's a gradual discovery that he encounters. Whereas I think that's a good observation. If someone is as reliant on their sense of smell as canids are described as being, you would notice the absence of that sense. Like if you woke up being unable to hear, you would recognize that within 2 breaths. If you woke up being unable to see, you'd recognize that immediately.
The other thing is really just a minor nitpick about the mirror, the scene or the part where he actually goes to the mirror.
Yeah.
There was it felt some slight odd construction there with, but it's like 2 words removed fixes it. I forget what it is. It was when he sees the reflection back at him. Something about the latter part of that just threw me off. And then plus
I moved to the bedside mirror. I would have been relieved to see myself reflected back in the mirror were it not for the fact that there were 2 other guys behind me, namely a white and black wolf.
Yes, that sentence.
Yeah, the mirror is redundant.
Back at me, and then also just saying 2 others behind me, as opposed to 2 other guys. That's I don't know how much of that is just me being nitpicky or.
Well, that's part of the job. We're kind of live editing here. Speaking of which, I did notice like there was a fair number of not necessarily typos, but like this could have used another pass. There was one I noticed early on. Yeah, even if they were creeping, that I crawled over, which is just a leftover from an earlier editing pass. Let me see. There was some other. Oh yes, canids like me is how it should be, not canids like I. I have a particular fondness for that particular bit of nitpicking. Now that's really an editor's job. No, it is like I. Hold on. Yeah, canids like I am have it the worst. It is like I. Help me. Am I right? Is it?
Yeah, no.
I mean,
I'm getting
Canids
confused
like
at the
I
moment.
have it the worst. That is correct.
Except that in the vernacular, you would totally say canids like me.
Right, but it feels like this is the kind of thing that
we could probably have an entire panel about this sort of.
Oh, there have been many about this. It's black and white.
I think this is the sort of thing
we get taught that it's my sister and
or.
I. Well, we get taught that it's my sister and I are going to the shops because my sister's going to the shops and I am going to the shops. Or they gave presents to my brother and me. They give presents to my brother and they give presents to me. Whereas some people overcompensate and, they gave presents to my brother and I. That is incorrect, but yeah, here it is correct. I'm just marveling at it.
You could also replace the I with myself and avoid the awkward construction there entirely.
We canids, also an option.
True. All right.
It's a very Canid-centric chat so far. Kurjibi, let's bring a cat's perspective in.
His internet literally just died.
Oh dear.
What?
Okay.
It's so Canid-centric.
But I'm an
Yeah,
otter.
The
no.
universe conspires to make it Canaan-centric.
I'm
Well,
sorry about
okay.
that. Yeah.
No problem at all. I'm looking at the clock here, and I'm noticing that we have 15 minutes left on our chat, and there is one more story that I'd like to get to by Kirisis, who's kindly joined us. I know that it's late over there. I hope that she's still around. I think she said she was grading papers in the background. She was on earlier. Can we invite Kirisis back, please?
I have invited Crisis.
Thank you. And
You
then
get-
we'll read.
You guys
Oh.
have a nice night. I have to go. It's way past my bedtime.
I was going to say
Thank you for
thank you
joining
so
us.
much for joining us, Summer Cap Mikasi. If you want to stick around and help us discuss Kirisis' story, thank you.
And here she is.
Okay, I'll be here.
Awesome. Oh, hey. So here comes Kirisis' story, Voices in the Water. Weightless. Mikasi, could you mute yourself? Can everyone else please mute themselves?
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Weightless. Free-floating. Freedom. Mineral-rich silt and soggy moss coated the air, filling the lungs of the young otter to the brim. La'e stared at the pinkish gold hues that danced on the waters of the river, painting her watery home in a dazzling array of colors, and tried to calm her jittery nerves. Today was the day. She was going to try now, after so many months of avoidance. No longer would she be the otter that feared the deep. She placed the webbed paw on the edge of the water, feeling slippery stones covered with algae, and exhaled slowly through her teeth. She could do this. She had to do this. Her initiation into the Kolinaisi River tribe was at stake. All she had to do was retrieve one of the sacred tiare pearls that lay hidden within the temperamental clams that rested on the riverbed. If she could bring that back, it would be beaded into her fur on River Day, when she, along with the other young adult otters, would be presented to the tribe as a full-fledged adult. If she couldn't, she would be banished to the dreaded sea, from where no otter ever returned. Shuddering, La'e took one step forward and then another, feeling the coolness of the water as it damped her fur. She waded in until she was about knee-deep and sighed. The horizon stared at her, waiting for her to break free from her indecision and enter the watery depths of Shalnaita, the kingdom of the water goddess Pumai. The surface of the water rippled and splashed, separating the chilly, somber realm of land with the freezing, dark depths of the bottom. La'e fluffed her fur and chided herself. I can't believe I'm afraid of this. It's just water. Thankfully, no one's awake to see my cowardice. Let's get this over with. Huffing once more, La'e took a deep breath and kicked her legs from underneath, dove into the depths of the running river. Once beneath the surface, the sleep-ladled world came alive for her. Where the trees of the land lined the edge of the waters, tall pillars of kelp rose from the depths to create haunted forests, their watery limbs reaching out to her like desolate ancestors, yearning to be buried with the honors and blessing of the tribe. Feeling the thin, protective covering slide down onto her eyes, La'e's powerful tail pushed into deeper waters. It was a bad idea to skim along the surface in the cool of the morning. It was a terrible one to decide to search deeper, but Shalnaita would never reveal her treasures willingly. Only the brave could explore her depths, while only the worthy could earn the revelation of her treasures. Small, silvery fish darted by the long, dark shape of the otter, while a larger tarpon plodded past her, daring her to attack. Instinctively, her paw flew to the dagger at her side, ready to slice the gills of would-be interlopers. Tarpon normally left rats or otters alone, fearing their teeth and claws, but a school of them might go after a lone otter if they felt frisky. It edged closer and closer to the swimming otter, its large jaw wide open, eyes curious, and a thread of panic washed over La'e. It was just her luck that the one time she decided to work up her courage, a fish would try to eat her. She flexed her tail and tried to shoot backward while reaching for her dagger. Maybe she was quick enough, she could make it back to the shallows with most of her body intact. Luckily, a crab ambling along the seabed proved to be a greater distraction, and La'e swam on, unscathed. Darting behind some river grass, La'e clutched a paw to her heaving chest, her whisker twitching in the strong current. When the feeling of impending doom released its icy grip on her, she nodded once, and then nodded her head. Come on, girl. It was just a fish. If I'm going to win, I need to be prepared to see much larger and scarier things in here. She kicked out from her hiding spot and headed out into open water once more. Things were a little easier this time, as she only passed small schools of fish that ran from her and, luckily, a bed of oysters. Hovering over their quiet harder, their featureless mouths opened to feed, and she made a note to come back here for a good harvest later. A few good oysters could earn her a couple of cowrie shells from the market, maybe enough to buy some kelp bread and spices for gumbo later. There was no one around, and as far as she could tell, no one had touched this nursery, so it was just ripe for the picking. Her mouth watered as she thought about bringing some of those salty, juicy oysters back home and roasting them over hot coals and basting them with coconut water. Perhaps if she brought enough back, her grandmother would leave her alone about trying for a higher place within the bevy. Well, with a full enough belly, she might just allow La-A a bit of peace without nagging her to learn how to weave palm fronds into baskets, or learn how to hunt some of the smaller creatures that lurk deeper inland. Never mind that, she thought. I could have a real meal and enough to trade for new knives and pans. Figuring that it was worth the risk, La-A nodded and propelled her body through the cool water towards the oyster bed. There's nothing to be. Something grabbed her tail and dragged her down into the water. She squeaked and fought to get away, but she was pulled deeper and deeper underwater by some unseen monster. Let those who can hear, hear. Come forth. Seek, and ye shall find. And that's where it ends. That's the snippet that we got. Oh, good gravy. Oof. Crisis, I feel really bad for having set the limits to 1,000 words because I want to see the rest now.
Yeah, I did mention that. It's like it's kind of a cliffhanger.
That it ends on the rising action. Oh, good grief. Yes, can I invite Mikasi, since you were the author whose work was previously Savage? Do you have any notes to make on this story?
Okay, comms check. Is it anyone hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right. First, one thing I like is there's one word that grounds the whole story to where it is. Is the word gumbo. So I more or less know this is probably in the southern United States or around the Bayou region. I mean, before that, I also was wondering, is it the Amazon rainforest or what?
I could see you shaking your head and nodding to affirm Crisis. Can you please correct us here?
Yeah, a better place would be probably in the Caribbean or off of the coast of California, somewhere warm and tropical.
Okay.
This is a limitation of our knowledge of the culinary traditions of the rest of the world. Yeah, like I know gumbo from Louisiana cuisine as well, but obviously, like it was a Creole dish. I believe it was a particularly American invention from enslaved Africans and people from Near East Asia, I believe.
All right. There's one part it was mentioned that the main character was afraid to be banished to sea. At first, I have a bit of difficulty wondering what is wrong with an author being banished to sea. I mean, there's water, right? I mean, shouldn't it be a bit greater threat to be banished inland or something, assuming this is part of the main continent? Furthermore, then one part is a bit interesting choice of words is that as she was underwater, her mouth watered. I mean, okay, she's underwater.
Yeah.
I mean, her mouth probably don't have water in it, but it might work better on dry land. So, okay. Then,
Thank you. Yeah, I caught that too. There was also a moment where she caught her breath behind some grass, but it wasn't. I don't think it was stated that she surfaced again at that point. In fact, I thought she was quite deep.
The mouth watering was when she see the oysters that she can sell for moolah.
Yes.
All right. Then okay, let me see. Actually, okay. Out of curiosity, do otters have a protective covering over their eyes when they go underwater, or are you talking about eyelids, Kirisis?
They have a protective covering over their eyes that kind of slides down over their eyelid, slides down over their eye,
the cornea,
beneath their eyelid. Yeah, it protects them from getting stuff in their eyes, and it's what it actually allows them to see underwater. It's kind of like having goggles.
Ah, that's clever. It's like a nictitating membrane.
All right. Then the part about when the tail was being grabbed. I mean, during that sentence,
Yeah.
I wouldn't drag her into the water. I mean, then the next paragraph, then you have when you see the drag into the water is a bigger shock. So maybe that part, best to leave it to the next paragraph.
Because it ends with, I mean, she's narrating to herself. There's nothing to be, and then something happens. Yeah, something grabbed her tail and dragged her down into the water. I kind of liked that it's stated quite clearly what happened, so we're grounded, and then after that we get the she's squeaking and fighting to get away, and she's being pulled deeper. I get that it's like, yeah, it's repeated information, but I actually think it's personally, I think it's quite important that it's stated at the start. I find I'm a little frustrated when there's these kind of surprises and interruptions, and then we don't get to know what the character was actually responding to. We just hear their fright. Like, I feel like that's the thing that I want to know most.
Okay. Oh, all right.
Well, no, I mean, this isn't. This,
Not
I'm
to
I'm
jump
sorry.
in.
I don't. Yes, thank you.
We have 3 minutes.
Yes, very good. We unfortunately the panel started a little late. Let me see. I say most constructively. I did not have a lot of comments to make. There were a few typos that I noticed that I tripped over. I loved the way that the tribe and its practices, or the village, the civilization that La is from, was established. Like the stakes of this ritual, the fact that she was doing it solo. Um, Also, like, what an independent woman she already is, even as ostensibly a child, buying her own pans, doing that kind of trade. This is something that's already expected from juveniles. Uh, 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 the There must be a very high standard of rugged independence for the adults, and yet the relationship with the grandmother is well established. So I don't even know if they live together, or whether it's not about personal ownership, but whether it's more of a collective ownership of the pans for her household, that she doesn't even think about having things as an individual. Am I close? Is there, like, what was your intention there?
My intention, well, first to kind of answer something, just as a point of clarification, Leai is a river otter. And so, if you're a creature that spends most of your life along a river, being banished to somewhere that's out of your element that you are not from would be probably the scariest thing for you. When I was writing it, it's kind of like kind of like how I felt when I immigrated from the United States up to Canada, like going somewhere I've never
Yeah,
been, having to meet people I've never met before. But getting back to the grandmother part, she does live with her grandmother, as it's later revealed on in the story. Later in this scene, she lives with her grandmother, which is weird because most otter pups live with both their parents. This is something that'll happen during the course of the story. You'll find out that she's an orphan and why, of course, she's afraid to go into the water. Um, Also, like, yeah, with the typos, that was I noticed them as you were reading. I was like, oh, there's a typo.
I'm sure that felt really reassuring and comforting to know that they were still there and that everyone could see them now.
Oh yes.
This is, yeah. This is the torment of having one's work exposed like this. Speaking of which, um, where is the rest of this story? Where can we see more?
Um, Actually, it's still kind of in my head. That is the reason why it has like a few typos and stuff is because it comes from a very, very rough draft.
Oh,
And
fair enough.
yeah, I haven't finished it yet, but it's like I've just been working on that scene and kind of perfecting it. And I'm kind of glad to hear all the questions that people had because those questions are what would make you want to read further into the story. So I'm glad that I've sparked a lot of people's interest.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah,
It is,
it's
alas, time for us to relinquish the room to the wonderful Maddie.
yes. Thank you so much, Karisis. Thank you to all of the authors who contributed works. Most of them also have stories up on The Voice of Dog. You can find that at thevoice.dog, which is probably the best web URL that anyone has ever claimed. Thevoice.dog. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to my panelists. The other authors. I'm going to see if I can name everyone. We've got Crimson Kurjibi, we've got Rob McWolf, Karisis, Mikasi Wolf, Bullpup, Oh, who am I missing? Oh, I'm missing
Buddy.
so many more. Buddy,
Summercat.
thank you, Summercat. And regrets to Sifadius, whose story we didn't get to. Thank you for submitting that as well. I hope you all had a great time. We should definitely do this again sometime. And now I don't know about you, but I'm going to sign out of Discord and log back into Twitch because I want to see Madison Scott Clary, who's coming up next with a panel about just type and nerdery and book layout. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.